Welcome back, everybody. For the last video of the year, I'm going to be going over the games that I beat in 2023. And at the very end of it, I will be revealing 2 games that I saved from this list. One of them will be the worst game that I played this year, and the other, of course, my game of the year, the best game that I played this year. Somehow, I managed to actually beat 25 games, and I played more than that. Probably because of the work that I've been putting into the channel, and it's been forcing me to play games at a bit of a faster rate, to sneak in a few more hours of game time when I can. It's been a lot of fun, I've enjoyed it, and I'm happy with the fact that I got through 25 games. Now, to make this a little more interesting, rather than just listing off every single game, I have compiled a little bit of information here. I've got some stats on the genres that I beat, the games per console or hardware that I beat, and also when these games were released. What decade did they come out from? So, without further ado, let's get into those statistics. Here are the number of games that I beat per genre. I only beat 1 action game, 1 fighting game, 1 roguelite, 1 sports game, and 1 strategy game. And I should mention right now that, with games that have RPG, action, simulation, whatever, some combination of genres, I just picked whatever genre first and foremost represents that game. Okay, so it's somewhat simplified here, and you can kind of see what games these are later on. I also beat 2 pinball games, 2 simulation games, and 3 adventure games. Okay, and then for the games that I played and beat the most, 4 JRPGs, 4 platforming games, and 5 puzzle games. Yeah, 5 puzzle games. I like my puzzle games. And the funny thing about that, when I see it on paper and it kind of matches the representation that was in my top 50 games of all time, it's like, okay, I knew I played a lot of puzzle games, but I didn't know that I enjoyed them so much more than the other genres. And puzzle games are a little bit shorter and you can play them intermittently. That works really well for me. So yeah, there you go. I played a lot of puzzle games, some platformers, and some JRPGs. And a little sprinkling of a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, the number of games per console, or what hardware these games are available on. I beat 1 game for the Game Boy, 2 games for the Game Boy Advance, 2 games for the Nintendo 3DS, and then 10 Nintendo Switch games and 10 games that I at least played on PC. Are they multi-platform? Were they released elsewhere first? Maybe, sure, but I played them and beat them on PC. And that kind of gives you an idea of what kind of gamer I am. I play the most modern console that I own, the Switch, and my PC games, huge Steam library, and every now and then I like to dip into the older consoles somehow. And to break that down further, here are the number of games represented per decade. So I have 1 game from the 90s, that's the Game Boy game. I have 5 games from the 2000s. Now, I will say, one of the games that I included here in the 2000s, it was released in Japan in 2007, but wasn't available in North America until 2010. I put it in Japan, doesn't really matter. From the 2010s, I beat 12 games, and then from the 2020s, just the modern games, right? I beat 7 games. So I'm also more of a modern gamer than I thought, or at least that was the case this year, and we'll see how it changes next year. Now, let's get into the games. Okay, so in January, I beat 1 game, and this was a replay, Plants vs. Zombies. I've talked about this game before. It's just one of the most fun and relaxing. I probably counted it as a puzzle game here, although I didn't write that in front of me. You guys know Plants vs. Zombies, right? I don't have to talk too much about it. If you're ever looking for something that you just want to play maybe a couple minutes of a mission at a time, it's kind of like tower defense on a grid. There's some puzzle elements in you getting your layout correctly, but not that that's any different necessarily from tower defense. So that's how I would describe it. Check the game out if you haven't played it yet. It's really fun. Everybody should play it at least once. In February, I also beat 1 game, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This is a game that I've covered in a review because it was that good, surprisingly good. So it's a game on the 3DS. This is basically the second Luigi's Mansion game. It's going to be remastered, I don't think remade, and released on the Switch next year as Luigi's Mansion HD. Like I said, I did a review, so if you want to hear me talk more about it, check that review out. This game gets my glowing recommendation because it is so much fun. The environments are jam-packed with a ton of detail and a ton of little things to investigate. The puzzles are fun. The mission length is just spot on, perfect. Somewhere between 2 minutes if you're familiar and you're replaying, maybe 8 minutes, 15 minutes for some of the harder ones. And one little thing that I'll mention, in case some of you are playing this right now or you're not going to watch the review, there's a really cool combat trick. There are going to be some bosses that are a little bit difficult. I'll admit, I even KO'd a few times. I had some game overs. But when you're sucking up a ghost, rather than pulling back the whole time, if you lean into the ghost, all of a sudden it's like you're on jet skis. And you just kind of follow the ghost around, and your control stick controls Luigi with much wider and quicker turns. So just a little combat tip. I'll throw that in there because why not? All right. In March, I beat Fire Emblem. So that was the first ported Fire Emblem, I believe, on the Game Boy Advance. I enjoyed it. It was a pretty good game. You know what? I'd beaten other Fire Emblem games before, like Shadow Dragons on the DS. I believe that's the title. And it's a series that I've wanted to play, especially with Three Houses, but I've got this thing about me where I need to play series in chronological order if I can. So I went all the way back to the original. It was a good game, pretty challenging. I had to cheese quite a few things by getting my levels up at certain points, and I'm looking forward to better Fire Emblem games. I'll say that, but it's not a bad game. The other game that I beat in March, I will save to the end, because it is the worst game on this list. All right, so in April, I beat 5 games, and the first one was Yoshi's Crafted World. Really fun game. You can enjoy it co-op. You can play it single player. It's one of the platformers that pads that number that I presented earlier. And this is a game that stylistically and artistically is a much better game than it plays. It's not like it's a boring game. Actually, it can be boring at times. It's monotonous sometimes. And the thing that keeps it the most refreshing, as opposed to different mechanics being introduced, are the visuals. There are some levels, yes, that will have different mechanics. Light and dark, hiding from certain enemies. Some enemies kind of hunt you down. They follow you persistently in a certain area. There are some different levels where maybe you're on top of a moving vehicle, and rather than navigating the platformer on feet, you're just on rails, and it's up to you to hit targets with your eggs. Those are my favorite levels. There's a lot of collectibles and a lot of ways to replay the game if you are someone who likes Yoshi. I'm going to talk about platformers in general a little more at the end of the video, because boy, do they come in many different shapes and sizes. So fun game, co-op or single player, there you go. Next, in April still, I beat Spelunky. Spelunky was so challenging, and this is a game that I've been working at for many years, and by the end of it, I was just ready to retire the game, right, before I picked it up again this year. But I can't do that. I can't just have a game that sits in my list that's uninstalled and, oh yeah, I abandoned that. Maybe I'll get back to it later. I cannot quit games. So Spelunky, a little too difficult, although a lot of people really love its mechanics and its gameplay. If that's you, fantastic. Just because you have such limited life and you're not exactly guaranteed the same run every time, it's a roguelite. It's not the roguelite for me. You know how much I love Slay the Spire, so I like certain roguelites more than others. Not this one. Roguelite, roguelike, whatever. I know that there's differences between the two and there's nuances. I forget what I'm supposed to call it for this video. Then I beat Animal Crossing New Horizons. And this is another game that I've been playing and taking my time with and popping into it year after year, month after month, or whatever the case was. And then finally, with a little bit of cheesing and a free trial on Nintendo Online and some people's islands that they host, I popped in, I grabbed some stuff, I grabbed some bells, I paid off the debts. And once I paid off the debts, I was like, okay, beat the game. The thing about Animal Crossing is it's whatever you make of it, right? I can't actually say whether it's objectively good or objectively bad. Are you playing it with other people? Are you sharing the experience with anybody else? That certainly adds to the game. If you're on your own, are you pleased? Are you having enough fun? If it's a really slow drip with the type of content that comes out and the type of things that you unlock per day. Because it's not a game where you can just cram everything into one single 24-hour session, right? You have to spread out your play sessions a little bit. And I like some seasons more than others, but I won't linger too long. Animal Crossing, I beat it by paying off my debts in April. Then I beat Mario Pinball Land. And I'll also just mention right now, the last game in April, I also beat Kirby's Pinball Land. So when I did my top 10 pinball games, these were a couple of the games that I played, managed to do them from start to finish. Mario Pinball Land is really unique for a pinball game. In it, and I guess you could just watch that video if you want me to talk about these games, but in that game, rather than just having the same static board, and there's a few things that you unlock, sometimes you get taken to a bonus stage, no, much different here. There are objectives and things that you have to hit and stars that you have to acquire by navigating your pinball on these different boards. Sometimes you take warp pipes to go into another area. Sometimes you let your ball fall down the funnel, and as opposed to losing, you actually go back to the previous screen. And so you're kind of navigating a little bit of a Mushroom Kingdom in that way. It's cool, but it did not play or feel the best. Kirby's Pinball Land, that's the Game Boy game that I beat, the only game from the 90s. It's definitely primitive. It's not like it's not fun, but everything just feels really condensed, really small on the Game Boy screen. They did a fairly good job with it, I will admit. I mean, it made my top 10 somehow. But it's not a game that I'm eager to go back to anytime soon over some other pinball games. Still, if you're someone who just likes to try every game, it's not a bad game. So far, I haven't actually listed any bad games, and guess what? I try not to play bad games. All right, in May, Final Fantasy 15. I did a review on that. I had to include it when I was ranking the Final Fantasy mainline games. Spoiler alert, it's one of my favorite Final Fantasy games in the franchise. A lot of the games in Final Fantasy play the same, right? Like from the 2D games, take your pick. From the 3D games until they become more action-oriented, we're 13 onward, I'd say, take your pick. So Final Fantasy 15 is one of those that is more action-oriented, but because I didn't like 13, 15 was kind of the one that I gravitated towards a little bit more. And yeah, it's really fun. It's definitely got its cheesy moments. It's not the perfect Final Fantasy game, but it is a really great glimpse into a Final Fantasy world, because there are so many little things in the game, whether it's the way that the foods are titled, the things that you can collect, the locations and the monsters. The whole game is an ode to the Final Fantasy series. It's not like they watered that down at all. Can you interact with everything the same way that you could in previous games? No, so that could be a little disappointing. For example, the magic system is very different. It's not going to be your traditional magic, and in that sense, it loses a lot of the Final Fantasy flavor, but it's still a great game. I mean, it's a polarizing game, and I'm on the camp that says it's a great game. August. I beat a lot of games in August. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, some of these are a little bit smaller, and some of these I'd been working on previously. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. How do you beat Super Smash Bros? You beat the adventure mode. This is a game that I'd been working on for a number of years, and it just seemed to go on and on and on, partly because I played on hard, and so some missions, some stages, they just took me so many tries. But I beat it! So there you go, Super Smash Bros. Great game, one of the most popular games. I can leave it at that. The adventure mode was a lot of fun. Katamari Damacy Reroll. I actually talked about this in one of my overrated games videos. It took a long time to click with me, and I complained about the controls, how they were not intuitive. I would stand by that, but at this point, I just have the way that the controls work in my muscle memory. So I'm used to using both control sticks. I'm used to one forward, one back to try to turn the ball, kind of like a shopping cart. It's really not the best way that you can control it, and for PC, they probably should have implemented another control scheme that you could switch to. But it was a fun game. Sometimes you're playing a level and you don't come up with the right score in time to beat the level, so you lose. And you're just like, how is that possible? I scoured everything that I could. I collected everything that I could. And it's a game that you just naturally get better at the more that you play. You don't necessarily realize how you're getting better, but you're more streamlined in your collection. Maybe you notice different things on the levels in different playthroughs. So I guess to wrap up with this game, even though I called it overrated before, it's not a bad game. It's actually a lot of fun. It's a lot of silliness. But yeah, I did enjoy it by the time that I finished with it. Next is Recettear, an item shop's tale. Pronounce that first word however you like. It's a mashup of the two main characters' names, Reset and Tier, so I'm calling it Recettear. And in this game, you have a little shop simulation. So it's a simulation game. You're managing the buying and selling of certain products. You'll typically go out to a market or go visit a weaponsmith, buy some items over there, bring them back to your shop, and the day is split into 4 parts: morning, afternoon, evening, and night, or something like that. And it's up to you to just do these little transactions with the different customers so that you can maximize your profits. Now, this is a game that is incredibly frustrating. If you try to play it blind, you will lose. And depending on when you lose and when you have to start over the game, because that's what happens when you lose, you go back to day 0. I should explain the premise first. You have 30 days to pay back your father's debt. So at the end of every 7 weeks, Tier is going to collect some money for you. You don't have the money, game over. It's brutal. And my first time playing it, I did have to reset the game. My second time playing it was actually spread over a couple of years, I think, because I just kind of got bored of it. And then when I went back to play, my progress was missing. My save was missing, or whatever it was. So I actually ended up playing the game basically 2.5 times, 3 times, however you want to look at it. That's part of what makes me dislike the game. At the time and when the game was coming out, it was really popular as a niche game online. I wouldn't ever call it a hidden gem though. It's unique. It's an experience that maybe exists in other games, but I've only ever experienced here. There's also a dungeon crawling aspect where if you want to go make money that way and find a lot of loot and free items to sell, it'll cost a chunk of your day to go do the adventuring, but then you can take those items back to your shop and sell them. And there are other things that I didn't necessarily explore during my playthrough because I was just trying to do one formulaic way of playing the game that worked for me so that I could finally beat it and put it down. And that was make a lot of small sales, build up your sales multiplier, and depending on which customer comes in, some of them you could gouge them. But that's what I did. Anyways, that's a long talk for the game. I was considering doing a little mini review or another overrated games videos. If I do, this game will still appear in it. I'm not going to dissuade anyone from playing it, and if you like the game, that's great, but it just got really tiresome, really tedious, and thank God I beat it, so I don't have to play it again. Next is Yoku's Island Express. I also talked about this game in my Pinball Games video. This is a really interesting mashup of pinball gameplay and adventuring. You're a little bug, you're a dung beetle, rolling your ball around on this island. You're also a courier, a mail carrier. And as you're performing these tasks and helping people out on the island, your platforming takes place by rolling your ball into these little pinball zones. And in each pinball zone, you'll control the flippers that are on screen, and you're going to be collecting items within there. Your currency is there, so collect as many of the fruit as you can. That's how you buy more things and unlock upgrades. You might be discovering some hidden paths, which will have more collectibles and more things to do. It's a fun game. It's not too long. Some of it could be a little frustrating. If you find walking on foot from location to location a little bit boring, that can slow down the experience again. If you're looking for a true pinball experience, this maybe isn't it, but if you are more of a platformer type of player, platforming gamer, then definitely check this game out. Okay, I also beat Rain World in August. I complained about this game before. I did a proper review on it, actually, because it is such a cool game. It is such a unique game. I wanted to give it the honor that it deserves, but I did not enjoy it. It's not for me. It's too hard, it's too cryptic, and playing through it was a slog. Also, for the type of game that it was really, really long. Again, you can check out my review. What I will say to the casual player, if you like the game, great. Maybe you could try playing on the pacifist setting, which I did not do. It's just the rewards are not worth the risks, and the challenge is far greater than the rewards that you receive as well. So that's what it is. It feels imbalanced when you play. Then we have Limbo, a very short puzzle game that is more story-oriented. It's more about the aesthetics of the game, and it never did it for me. Maybe if I played this game around the time of its release, I think it was winning like Indie Game of the Year back then. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more, but it's not my type of puzzle game. 2D environmental puzzles that just miss the mark sometimes. Sometimes the puzzles actually include timing or running and jumping, grabbing onto certain things, beating the flow of water, whatever it is. I didn't really care for those challenges, but I stuck through it because it was a short game and I could beat it, and I did. Then we have Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. This is a game that I wanted to like a lot more. You basically have these little puzzle worlds that are these dioramas, and you can flip them and turn them and look at them from all kinds of different angles. It's a game that is much more cool and interesting than it is fun. The puzzles aren't necessarily challenging. If you don't get every item or collectible or whatever it is on your first try, you could try again. I think because once you beat the puzzle, you know it's the same solution every time. So if you have to replay a puzzle to get the collectible, it's like, okay, you go through the motions to beat it the same way. Maybe you scour a few more bushes or this and that. It's not a bad game by any means. It's just a game that I would have wished for some things to be a little bit different, and I'm not going to break it down and overanalyze it in this game. I enjoyed my time playing it, and I tried the 3DS version, but I ended up beating it on Switch. I enjoyed my time with it. It's just a decent game. In September, in preparation for making my ranking the Pokemon mainline games video, I beat Pokemon Ultra Sun. Ultra Sun was a bit of a disappointment after what I was remembering with my experience with Moon. For the 3DS titles, Moon was the one that I played the most. And then so many years later, when I went back to play an Ultra version, which is supposed to be the cream of the crop, and the enhanced version and the definitive way to play, it was fine. I just had a lot of problems that I explore in more detail in the Pokemon ranking video. So I'll say Ultra Sun was fine. Unfortunately, because Pokemon games are so long, and despite the fact that I tried to speed through it, it was the only game that I beat in September. In October, there was Pokemon Legends Arceus. Now that is a really good game, which I also did a review of on the channel. At this point, I am really going to try to just say less and tell you to go watch the review. Arceus, I have summed it up and I have recommended it to other people as if you are somebody who loves catching them all, if Pokemon for you is a catching experience, then you will enjoy Arceus. It's really interesting being taken back to Pokemon's past and to seeing a lot of the origins of the connections that are made between human and Pokemon, and the relationships between, having Geodudes and Gravelers do work for humans and construction workers and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting. It's a game that kind of shows you some lore that hasn't been explored in other games, and it's fun gameplay for me, but I understand it doesn't work for everybody else. November, 2 games beaten. Pokemon Scarlet. This is a pretty good game as well. I did enjoy it. I thought they did a lot of things well. However, there were also aspects where I feel like they took one step back, or one step forwards, and then a different step backwards. So when they make improvements to the Pokédex, and you can see so many more things in the Pokédex, and you get rewards for catching Pokemon, that's great. But then why do you have to reduce the functionality of the Pokédex where you can't even scroll through multiple Pokemon at a time? I believe even the search functions have been diminished. I also didn't like how they changed breeding. Maybe it's better, maybe it's not. Nobody answered that in Where Does Pokemon Go Next, another video that I made. And yeah, Pokemon Scarlet, a good game overall, but I'm not too eager to buy the next Pokemon game, and I did not buy the Scarlet DLC. I think for now, I'm probably done with the series. Also in November, Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury. Now, Super Mario 3D World is a really great Mario platformer. One of the best 2D Mario games, or 3D, sorry. But even compared to the 2D games, it is one of the best. The 3D game that exists on the 3DS, it was okay, it was fine. This is a much better version of that type of game. Highly recommend if you're looking for a Mario game. I haven't played Wonder. This is a great one to turn to. And then Bowser's Fury is really interesting. It's fairly short, and it's kind of got elements of Super Mario Sunshine, the way that they provide power-ups to you, so you have a little power-up bank, a wallet essentially, where you can have 5 of every power-up, and you can just switch to them anytime that you want. I love that. I would like to see something like that in a 2D Mario game, because it just gives you so much more versatility in how you want to approach different levels. So yeah, the platforming in the game, very similar to Super Mario Sunshine. I liked it for that reason. Super Mario 3D World, a great game, a very pleasant surprise. And then Bowser's Fury, had a great time with that too. Okay, I'm speaking to you guys from the ether right now. I'm chiming in with a quick little edit because I realized that I forgot a game. Sometime between November and December, I played a fantastic puzzle game called Flip-On. I played it on the Switch, and if I just quickly update the statistics for you, it brings the number of puzzles beaten to 6. So now they're winning by a wider margin. It's one more game for the Nintendo Switch, putting it 1 ahead of PC, so that's nice, it breaks the tie. And one more game for 2020s, that doesn't change too much. So what do we have here? Flip-On is a Tetris Attack style game. Some of you know how much I love Pokemon Puzzle League, one of my favorite games of all time. This isn't as good, but it certainly scratches that itch. The major difference between the two games is that in Pokemon Puzzle League, if you are completing a combination and you've got some falling blocks, at the last second you can quickly swap and it'll still count towards that chain. In this game, if you swap something while a block is falling in hopes that it builds the chain, it will not. So you have to pre-plan some things just a little bit more in this game. I kind of like the aspect in Pokemon Puzzle League, how you can make decisions at the very last second, and it's a little more of a reaction style game, but that doesn't really diminish from this game too much. The single player campaign was a lot of fun. There are different ways to play, different modes that the game throws at you as you're learning the game. So you'll have your typical battle where it's you versus the computer, and you're just building up your screen and trying to throw garbage their way. There are puzzles, like were also available in Pokemon Puzzle League, and there are variations on a marathon type of mode or a time attack type of mode. So you've got the blocks constantly rising from the bottom, and you've got different objectives that you've got to perform as you're clearing them out. Maybe you've got to do a certain number of chains, certain number of combinations, and a combination, by the way, is just solving minimum 3 blocks. If you are looking for a Tetris Attack style of game, then look no further than this one. Of course, you could play the classics, and they're probably better, but this is fun, and for $2, I believe I grabbed it on sale. I mean, you can't really complain about that. And you'll enjoy the campaign, you'll enjoy the presentations, really cute, really vibrant and colorful. It's not just available on Nintendo Switch. I see here that it's also available on Android, Microsoft, Windows, and Mac. So take a look for this game. Tetris Attack, if you've never played that kind of puzzle game before, it's really fast-paced, it's really addictive, and a lot of fun. So there you go, Flip-On, and that means I beat 26 games this year. All right. Now, December, the final 3 games that I beat, and then I'll do the final 2 games, period. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. This is a game that I really wanted to enjoy. I gave it my best. I gave it my attention, and it just didn't work for me. There's something about the Donkey Kong formula for platforming games, and maybe this is why the game and the series isn't more popular. Doesn't help that Rare is not churning them out, but again, maybe this is why. It's a more difficult type of platformer, and my most fun with the game was on the atypical gameplay portion. So I really like being in the cart on rails. I didn't particularly enjoy some of the more challenging platforming that was done with the vines and jumping and clinging to different things. The collectibles can be really difficult to discover, which encourages you to replay the levels, but the levels are long. Now, it may not seem that way during the time trials because it's like you get a gold if you beat the level in 1:40. And yet, if you're just casually playing the level, it's 4 minutes, 5 minutes. You're looking under every tree, you're blowing away every leaf, you're stomping on everything that looks like it could be stomped on in hopes of getting a collectible. And usually, I didn't. I think there was only like 1 or 2 levels that on my first playthrough, I got all puzzle pieces and every rare symbol. Now, the end of the game also, the final boss fight. I think it was the final boss fight with a big spike. Yeah, huge difficulty spike. I didn't mind the boss fights. I don't know. I'm not going to get too much into the game now and its difficulty. It was challenging. Yes, I ended up beating it in the end, but I didn't like how a lot of the gameplay felt. I liked a lot of the unique mechanics, but Donkey Kong is not for me. And what I wanted to say about the different platformers, I'll keep it short, is just it's very clear that there are different styles of platforming games. There are the Mario games that are a little more casual, that are more focused on having different power-ups and exploring the worlds in different ways, and you're trying to find secrets here and there. Donkey Kong games, which do have their secrets, but they're not as satisfying for me, and they're a little more challenging overall. However, I do like using the different Kongs. They are fun, but not as many power-ups. They're kind of like in the same realm as the Crash Bandicoot games, I would say. And then you have the really casual platformers like Kirby and Yoshi, which are also not my favorites. So that's just kind of something that I realized after I beat this game. It's, yeah, you know, not every platformer is created equally, and I clearly like one more than the others. Okay, next game in December, Lost Planet Extreme Condition. This is a game that I played and beat for my winter games list. It did not make the cut, however. It's very arcadey. You don't have to worry about ammo. You don't have to worry about your health. You have those things in abundance. You are really just, well, there's different difficulties to play, and I played on normal. Maybe on hard, those things actually matter a little bit more. But the game is just really silly. It doesn't feel like there are very many stakes. And it has, speaking of silliness, Capcom writing. And the Capcom writing is cheesy. The Capcom writing really disengages you and prevents you from caring or getting too immersed at certain times. And yet, as the missions progressed and the stakes are getting bigger and bigger, and certain characters have this or that happening to them, you're supposed to care. But I just couldn't really take the game seriously, even though a few missions in, you're expected to. So, odd presentation, odd writing, a fine story, fine characters, fun gameplay, but it's arcadey, and that's not necessarily something that I enjoy too much. If the game were a little more serious, if the different weapons had more differences in how they felt and how they affected different enemies, I would be all for that. For example, if enemies had different weaknesses and you had to switch between more weapons, maybe also having more than 2 at a time in your inventory. I don't know. It's not a bad game. It's another game that's just not for me. But I had some fun with it. And then finally, the game that I beat today, the morning of the making of this video, Mario Golf Super Rush. I will continue to play the game. I will continue to play more modes and try to unlock more emblems on my profile. I say that I beat the game because I beat the adventure mode. Now, I read several reviews about this game just to see what other people were saying and to see if they would have the same complaints as me. They did not. They complain about the story, how it starts out like a Pokemon game. It kind of feels like that way with the introduction. You're moving in, there's your mom figure. Oh, go on your adventure. You meet some other people. The story mode itself is fine. It took a long time for me to get into, but I actually thought the further I went into it, the more I enjoyed it. And the story, the writing itself really did not matter. It's just a vehicle so that you can progress through the different missions. The missions improved, and the missions were more fun later on in the story mode. Now, I feel like there are some game modes missing here. I don't think there's a proper ring attack, which I would like, but maybe that's for the best because here's the big complaint with the game. You do not have as much control over your shots. Some people are immediately going to disagree with me. Hear me out though. In Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, you can move your camera around much better, all over the whole field, and you can zoom into different parts, and you can see different parts of the golf course that you might want to send your ball to, or you just want to take a look at. Maybe you want to observe the hazards a little differently. You do not have the same freedom in your camera controls in this game. There's the one camera button, which takes you further out, takes you to where your shot is going to land. But from there, you can't slide, you can't pan, you can only zoom in and out. Why can't you pan across the course? There's another camera mode where if you press the left trigger, you have this forward, kind of this POV view of the scene ahead. And you can aim to put your shot there, whatever. But I just want an overhead view that you can zoom in and scroll around with. I'm not asking for too much. The other thing that really bothered me is when setting up the trajectory of your shots, You actually can't aim your shots like in Toadstool Tour, where it was just press the D-pad and you're going to hit the ball here or here to add some spin, or down or up to make it go short or high. In this game, you hold the thumbstick to the right or the left or up and down while your bar is going, and then that affects the spin. But because it's not something that's predetermined, it doesn't actually show you a different trajectory for how high or how low your ball can go. And what does this mean? For getting your ball onto different elevations, a lot of the time I was just guessing. Now maybe I'm not playing the game properly, but in that sense it seemed like they tried to make the game a little more casual by having less elevations and also no ring attack. Because how are you going to aim and ring attack if you can't actually see the proper trajectory of your ball? So that's my mini rant. I did enjoy the game the more that I played it, and upon putting it down, upon beating it, I do want to play it more and unlock a few more things. So that's good, because when I first started playing the game, I had no inclination to keep on going with it. I was just like, oh no, this is not as much fun as Toadstool Tour. I also did not enjoy World Tour for the 3DS, so maybe it's something about me with the new Mario Golf games. Anyways. Okay. So my least favorite game of the year was the Timeless Child Prologue that I played on PC. Now some of you are going, what the heck? I've never even heard of that game. And if you have heard of it, why am I critiquing a prologue? Because I beat it. That's what was released and I beat it. It's a co-op environmental puzzle game. And whether it was because of our internet connections or the strength of our computers, I don't know, but the game really chugged for me. The puzzles themselves, despite the graphics and despite the quality of the game, of the performance, the puzzles were not amazing. One of them in particular was far too frustrating. Another one seemed like it would be frustrating, but it was just really convoluted. So it's like, there wasn't a great balance in there, but I gotta give the creator credit. I think it was one person who designed the whole game, and he did fairly well. But still, compared to all these other, not only complete games, but more fun games, Timeless Child is my least favorite game of 2023. Now, my favorite game for 2023. In July, I beat The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Many of you subscribed to my channel because of the Tears of the Kingdom videos that I did. I loved the game. It's become my favorite game of all time, I'm pretty sure. And just, what can I say about it? Go watch some of the other videos I made. I made combat videos where I did choreographed scenes and had a lot of fun, even if some of them took a couple of hours. Redoing those for the perfect takes. There was no such thing as a perfect take. And I did my tips guides, my tips mini-series. And then I did a couple of reviews, 3 reviews to be precise, where I basically just talked endlessly about the game and how much I enjoyed it. So Tears of the Kingdom was the only game that I beat in July. You'll notice that I skipped June here because I was playing Tears of the Kingdom non-stop. And that is it. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope I could show you some games that you've never seen before. For those of you who are following the channel, now you know a little bit more about my taste in games. But like I said earlier, a lot of what I played this year was because I wanted to do certain videos on the channel, and I had to play certain games to get that done. But I enjoyed myself. The fact that I beat 25 games is a little bit of a miracle, and we'll see how I do next year. Hope everybody else had a great time playing all their games this year. Let me know what you've been playing. I've watched some of your Game of the Year videos and some of the videos about the games that you beat this year, and I've been enjoying them as well. Rave about your favorites, rave about your least favorites. If you observe that you played more puzzle games or more platformers or more retro games, let me know as well. Basically, just say whatever you want in the comments. I'm going to enjoy reading about it. Merry Christmas to everybody. Have a happy new year, and let's see how 2024 is. All right? Thanks for watching again. Bye-bye.